The pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu, the Terracotta Army. These wonders of the ancient world are still intact, designed by civilizations that built with the intention of something lasting forever. Hi, I'm 𝗟𝗟 𝗠𝗂𝗃. To this very day, we still marvel at the scale and survival of the artifacts of ancient civilizations. How'd they do it? Well, there's many factors, but one key element is teamwork. You see, when people are on the same page, on one accord, pursuing the same outcome, it's amazing what can be accomplished. Think about that. As a leader, you will inevitably have to assemble and manage a team to achieve something bigger than what any of you could do individually. But how can your team build something to last if there isn't a foundation of respect for different points of view, appreciation for different cultures, and productive dialogue that's conversational and not confrontational? We can only operate to the extent that we're willing to put in the work to understand differences and leverage them to maximize results. With hate crimes on the rise, it's more important than ever to start having these conversations, no matter how difficult. Simply put, you can't build great civilizations if everyone is at odds with each other. This is Season 12, Episode 151. Let's start the show.
Welcome to Business Infrastructure, the podcast about curing back office blues of fast-growing businesses. If you're a business owner or operator looking for practical tips and solutions to scaling your business in a sustainable manner, you're in the right place. Now here's your hostess, 𝗟𝗟 𝗠𝗂𝗃.
This season, we are unpacking two areas that every business was forced to contend with as a result of the pandemic of 2020, diversity and digital transformation. If you've been listening to the previous episodes from this season, then you already know that you're in for an engaging as well as educational episode. And joining me today in the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California, is the exceptionally talented Jennifer Wang. She's the founder and CEO of Wang Consulting, which is an event planning firm whose client list reads like a who's who in entertainment. You know, some of her clients include Netflix, Hulu, Showtime, and many, many more. In fact, Jennifer has managed and produced over 600 events in the course of her 20-plus year career. Wow. Jennifer, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, I'm so excited, as you know, because for those of you listening, Jennifer, this really does feel like part two of a great conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And so we're literally just kind of making it official now by pressing the record button. Yes, I had the pleasure of also interviewing your husband, 𝗪𝗪 Torres. And when he told me about your background, I knew right away that I wanted to meet you. And I was wondering if we could actually start there because, and I hope I'm remembering this correctly, was it that you grew up in Vietnam and you speak Japanese fluently?
So actually, I was born in Vietnam and I only lived there for 6 months. So I don't have a recollection of my childhood there. We did. So we left and we traveled a lot. I lived in Hong Kong for about a year, Taiwan for about a year,
Wow.
Singapore for about 2 years, and then went to Japan for 2 years. And that's where I went to kindergarten and first grade and spoke Japanese fluently, even though I'm Chinese. And I then moved to the States when I was 7. So then came here and I've been here ever since. So I consider myself an American Chinese.
American Chinese. Okay.
Yeah.
Not Chinese American. Is there a distinction? Jessie and I actually had a very similar conversation. It's like, okay, is it Mexican American, Mexican? Like, I know there's a distinction, but what is that? Is that a conversation that you all have? I know it's definitely a conversation we have in the Black community.
That is actually so interesting that I just called myself an American Chinese instead of Chinese American. That is really an interesting point you just made. I I would say that I definitely identify as an American with Chinese descent. But culturally, I would say I grew up with my parents raising me with Chinese culture. And with that being said, it was quite hard sometimes to navigate through how to appropriately have my relationship with my parents, because I grew up in America, where America is, it's about standing up for yourself and you get to speak your mind and you are you. But in the Chinese culture, we really are, we're raised to listen to our parents. And there is no, oh, how do you feel about that? It's this is what I say and this is how it goes. And in fact, I talk about this a lot with my friends who are Asian and then also my friends who are not Asian. And I tell them there's a word, it's called 孝顺, which in English, and I don't know if I'm botching this, but there was never a word, an American word that defined what that is. And one day I discovered it. And 孝顺 in English is actual filial piety. And yes. So if you're like, have you ever heard that word before? A lot of people will say, I have not. And essentially what it is you are taught to respect your elders and your parents. And that is the one thing that is ingrained in you. And that is how I grew up. So, but then being in America and understanding American culture and seeing how my friends were growing up with their parents and the conversations they were having with their parents, I was like, wait, so maybe I can say how I feel to my parents, but nope, they were not having it.
Yeah, probably not a good idea, Jennifer.
No. So they were not having it. And so it was an interesting balance that I had to figure out as I was growing up, to figure out how to be my own person, but also being respectful to my parents, because having their approval and their acceptance was very and is still very important to me. And, so it's been interesting trying to navigate that, and being a parent myself now, I have to figure out how I want to raise my kids. And, I see the good in both. So I always think it's better to have a happy medium of everything. I don't believe in extremes. I think that I always feel like the best solution is always the happy medium. You could take both, the best of both worlds, if you will. And that's what I'm trying to do, which is to take the best of both worlds and making my decisions based on that. So
now I have to ask you, this is a term that I learned many years ago, and that is the tiger mom. I'm Black, but I had a tiger mom. So I know all about, not talking back, and
yes,
there would be consequences and serious repercussions if you did.
That's right.
But I'm curious, because I noticed that you studied psychology, right? At UCLA. Yep. The reason I'm bringing up the whole tiger mom piece is because I'm wondering if you had a similar experience to me, Jennifer, because I have a degree in chemical engineering.
Wow.
And I did work in the industry for many years, and then ultimately decided I did not want to spend the rest of my working life in a chemical plant or an oil refinery. And so although my parents are proud, I'll say my mother in particular, I think it still bothers her that I left that field behind. So my question for you, the reason I bring up the whole tiger mom piece is because I'm wondering, obviously I'm making the assumption just based on how you told me you were raised that education was extremely important. How did you go from psychology to becoming a bona fide event planner? And did you receive any type of backlash, I guess, from your parents?
Right. So when I grew up, I will give a lot of credit to my parents, even though they were very strict. I mean, they let me be independent and they let me figure it out, which I really appreciate them for doing that. And they allowed me to be my own person. And they were never the parents who said, you have to be a doctor or you have to be a lawyer. I actually wanted to be a pediatrician all on my own. Yeah, I wanted to be a pediatrician. I did everything I needed to do to be pre-med. I volunteered at the hospital, all the usual things. then I get to college and, I was actually a psychobiology major because I wanted to be a doctor. And then OChem happened, second year of UCLA, and it's called the Weeder class for a reason. It definitely weeded me out. And I said to myself, I guess I don't want it bad enough. And I had a quarter life crisis. I didn't know what I was going to do. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was like, I can't believe I'm having a quarter life crisis. What is happening? I knew, I didn't know what path I was going to take. So I ended up actually going to a career fair my junior year, maybe senior year. And I found out, or I saw somebody sitting there and it said event planner. And I said, oh, what do you do for a living? And this is before the wedding planner with J-Lo came out, right? So wedding planning and event planning way back then was not a thing. So I said, what do you do? And she said, I plan events. I said, you get paid for planning events? And she said, yes. And I said, that's what I want to do. I do that all the time at school. I was part of a student organization called the Student Alumni Association that planned a lot of events. And I started looking online, but there were no internships back then. There were no internships for event planning. So I then took the next route, which is I started looking at job postings, and I called those event planning companies and I said, are you looking for an intern? And, the one company I called, they said, what do you mean an intern? I said, I would work for free. I want to work for free to see if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So the person I talked to went and talked to the owner of the company. And she said, she wants to work for free. Yes, bring her in, of course. So I worked for that company, and I actually ended up working for that company for many, many years. And my very first event ever, I still remember, was the Ally McBeal wrap party. So yes, that is how long ago that was. And that was my first taste. And I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was just so exciting. And I couldn't believe I found a job and a career that I got to do for a living what I enjoyed. I mean, what a dream. So that is how I stumbled into event planning. And I wish I could remember that person's name, because I will have to thank her, but now I don't even know. So that is how I became, and in terms of backlash, there were no backlash. They didn't understand quite what event planning was, my parents, but they supported me, and I appreciate them for supporting me.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that definitely means a lot, because I know that can also be really miserable if you want to honor and respect your parents, and they are your elders and they know things that you don't know yet because you haven't lived long enough. And so to be able to have that type of alignment, that's a great thing. Speaking of events, Jennifer, when you and I first talked on the phone, shortly after that conversation, I thought about something that happened here in Atlanta, where I am, about 11 years ago. There was an event at the High Museum here in Atlanta, and it was an exhibit of the Terracotta Army. And it was one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen in my life. They actually had some of the warrior statues and the horses and the chariots that they actually had at the museum. And this was definitely before the pandemic, because it was packed inside of this museum. But I remember at one point, a white woman, she walked up to me and she whispered in my ear, if the emperor had known Jesus, he would have known that drinking mercury, she said, if the emperor had known Jesus, he would have known that Jesus is the only way to eternal life and salvation. And I'll give the context behind her statement. So the Terracotta Army, for those who are listening and aren't familiar with the Terracotta Army, it was this massive temple tomb type complex, I guess, dedicated to the first emperor of China. And in this exhibit, they talked a lot about, this quest for immortality. And this was something that I think you see in a lot of those ancient civilizations. And at one point, he was actually drinking mercury because he thought that might help to extend his life. And so that was why she made that statement to me. And so I'm sorry for going on and on about this. I promise I'm wrapping this story up. But what I said to her, Jennifer, was, do you see the placard here in front of this statue of him? And she was like, yeah. I said, yeah, it says that he died in 210 BC, before Christ. So how could he have known Jesus if Jesus technically had not even been born? And the reason I thought about that story is because sometimes it's ignorance. There were so many things wrapped up into that one exchange. I'm bringing that up because I'm curious to know your thoughts. Do you think it's possible to teach or correct others when they say something like that without being confrontational or disrespectful? I have this conversation often with a lot of my friends and my colleagues. And it's, when people say things rooted in stereotypes, or because I'm sure she felt that she could have that conversation with me, just assuming that because I'm Black, that I must be Christian. So let me make this statement to her because I know she'll support it, but I'm sure she was not expecting my response. But I had to let her know, like, you're wrong. But I don't want to be loud about it. I don't need to be confrontational. But ma'am, look at the dates of when he was born and versus when he died. It's BC. So what are you talking about? So I'm curious, Jennifer, what is it possible for us, or to your point earlier about not wanting to appear to come across as disrespectful, but at the same time, do we each have a responsibility, in your opinion, to educate people when they say things that are just off or just flat out wrong?
I think this is such a fascinating topic and question, really, because I have been talking to my friends as well a lot about that and having those uncomfortable conversations. So I just want to start off by saying that you went ahead and pointed out why what she said was just a generalization and an assumption, but you didn't flat out say you're wrong. The way you did it was so tactful. And I think that more people do need to do that. So I think in our time right now, wow, there's just so much to say about it. But I think, when we were having our previous conversation, I think that we are in a very, very interesting time right now where we are quite divided in our beliefs, our thoughts, what have you. I mean, there's just so much that I feel like we're just so left or right, if you will. And I think this comes back to me saying, like, why are we the middle just seems to be in a good place if everybody could just listen to each other. But I do feel that it is important to educate and or have those uncomfortable conversations when appropriate. So if you do see something where you're like, oh, this is my opportunity to maybe educate, and it could be a little bit uncomfortable, it is very important for all of us to take part in that, because I think what's happened is we have been taking the easy way out. We have just labeled. So you could have easily looked at that person and was like, well, she's just stereotyping, and walked away. Right. And I think that's what a lot of people have been doing, which is the easy way, which is like, that person's a racist, so I'm just going to move on with my life. I do not need to associate with that person. I'm just going to move on my merry way, and that's it. But because we've been doing that and sweeping everything under the rug, or, and we think the problems have been solved, it hasn't. In fact, a lot of it is coming to the surface. And the surface right now is quite hard to swallow. And seeing how much hate there is out there is really quite eye-opening. And I know, people were hiding under their rocks and not really saying what they were feeling. But now we're really seeing the truth, and the truth is really hurting. And I mentioned this to you before, but I feel like we are in the painful part of history right now, and that we really have to do the work, and we have to get through this pain before we can come out to the other side. And if we continue to sweep everything under the rug and or just place labels on people and take the easy way out, we are going to continue to be in this position that we are. And in fact, now it's out in the open, actually. And we're out in the open. And if we don't do anything, we're going to go divide even further, actually. So now that everything's out in the open, it is up to all of us to speak up and we don't have to go to a protest to speak up. And I'm not even talking about that, right? Like not all of us are protesters,
right?
Right. And you don't need to do that, but it's that one little comment that really what you just said is so awesome. It's that one person. And I bet you it made that person think, and it's going to take a lot of work. And really, sometimes it could take years. It's going to take years. This is not an overnight solution. But if each one of us, imagine if each of us had an uncomfortable conversation with just one person, and we continue to work on that one person, whoever that may be in our lives, imagine what that could do if each person just found a buddy or a person that they feel they can, talk to and have that uncomfortable conversation with and find commonality. Because really, at the end of the day, we all are humans. And I would like to think, and maybe this is very naive of me, that we all want the same thing, which is innately, when we were all babies and kids, like, I just don't see how we could have evil in us. And maybe that's me being naive, but people only know what they know. So they are only going to believe what they know, and they know what they know. So, and you cannot ask a question that you don't know what to ask. So it is up to all of us, if we do see something, for us to say something about it. And that's speaking up. And it doesn't necessarily have to be some giant thing that you have to go out and do. No, if each of us can do something little just by exactly what you did, I guarantee this world, we are going to be in a much, much better place.
Is that similar to what's known as like the butterfly effect? Is that kind of what that is, where one small action can just multiply? I could be way off right now. I don't know, but I think I don't know. Maybe
I do.
not.
I do. No, I don't know if it's the butterfly effect and if that's exactly what it is, but I think that if each person affected one person, it's a 1-to-1, right? So imagine if it's a 1-to-1. I really, truly believe that you could make a difference. Each one of us can make a difference. And we all just need to say, okay, I'm ready to do this, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes people just think, you know what, it's not worth my time. Actually, and I feel like a lot of people right now are thinking, why do I even want to bother my breath with someone who's never going to change their minds? And I feel like that's how a lot of people are feeling, which is they're always going to be that person. So what's the point? And that's where we're getting stuck, because people feel like, what is the point?
Yeah.
Is change happening? Right. So, but that's not true, actually. I think that it's going to take a lot of work, and it takes people like you and all of us to be able to do that. So,
yeah, something else that came to mind listening to you, Jennifer, is this idea of cancel culture. And to your point, it's easy to just, so-and-so is canceled. Next, we're just going to banish him or her to, oblivion, without really addressing, well, why did this person say this? I'm thinking, what kicked off with the Me Too movement, for example, or just canceling people at the slightest offense now, without really, to your point, without having those conversations. It's just easier to say, okay, we're going to remove your platform and you no longer can say what you want to say, without trying to actually have a conversation with that particular person to figure out, why did you say that, or why did you do that? So yeah, that was just something that came to mind. And something else that I thought about, and I know you'll appreciate this, having your psychology background, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of came to mind. That when you mentioned that, look, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We want safety and, food, clothing, shelter, the basic needs, right? And sometimes these external factors can impact the way that we navigate and perceive the world around us. So, that was really interesting. I want us to shift gears just a little bit and talk more about digital transformation. And, I was looking at your capabilities statement, Jennifer, and I was like, hey, I thought she said she didn't leverage digital technologies. Shame on you, Jennifer. You totally do. Jennifer told me that she doesn't really leverage technology, as a result of the pandemic. And then I saw this beautiful capabilities slide deck that she shared with me. And there were a couple of slides in there actually about virtual events.
That's right. That's right. I say I'm not doing too many virtual events only because I feel like I've been using the same platform. But yes, I have done virtual events and I've learned a lot from it. And it's really quite exciting. And I always say to myself, the day I stop learning from my career is the day I know I need to move on to something else. And even 20 years later, I love what I do because I am continually growing, which is crazy that after 20 years, I'm like, oh, I still am learning. So, when the pandemic hit and I did have to switch to virtual for a little bit, I learned so much. I actually feel like I became more of a TV producer than an event producer, right? Like it felt like I was producing a TV show versus doing a live event. So I definitely have new skill sets under my belt.
Absolutely. It's funny because I would kind of jokingly say, I feel like I'm a lighting specialist. I'm a camera person, all of these other things where, the talent literally usually just shows up and there's a whole production crew to do everything else for you. But yeah, we don't really have that luxury right now. But what I would like to do is I'm wondering, because you said something to me again when we spoke before about event planning really being like project management. And I'm wondering if we could actually talk through a typical process that you go through, Jennifer, as you are planning an event. And, I know you've done some work with the movie, The United States versus Billie Holiday, and also with Godzilla versus Kong. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. So that Godzilla versus Kong was a drive-in. It was actually my first live event back in a year. And, there was a moment right before the event started where I got choked up because I hadn't put on a walkie-talkie in over a year. I hadn't seen my vendors, together like that. And, it was only 30 cars. It was a small press screening. And we did as much as possible to make it contactless. It was super safe. And, that safety was actually our first and main concern. But everything we did, we took into account making sure safety was first. But having that live event in over a year, it was really special. And I was reminded of why I love events so much and just seeing everything on paper come to life and seeing people's reactions as they come in and see the lighting and the giant, green screen that we created for the car photo op and, not a regular little dinky little photo op backdrop, but we had a full 12-foot high, 20-foot wide backdrop that a car stopped in front of. And we lit the entire space, Godzilla versus Kong colors. So it was really super special. And I was so happy to be back and to be doing live events again, because I have sorely missed it.
Yeah, I'm sure. And, I'm wondering if we can also talk about this from a business infrastructure perspective. And for those who are listening to this show for the first time, business infrastructure is an operating system for how you link your people, your processes, and your tools to ensure that growth at your company happens profitably as well as sustainably. So if we could focus on those three aspects, the people, the process, and the tools. And I think if we kind of very generically, and I know this might not be a fair question, but if we could focus on that process piece and then kind of talk about some of the people that you would normally leverage to execute different steps of that process, as well as some of the different tools that you're leveraging and technologies. So I would imagine that one of the first things, if we think about again these two movies that you've
Mhm.
recently done events for,
Mhm.
is one of the first steps I would imagine is first trying to determine what type of client it
Right.
is and what type of event they're planning.
So the first thing is the client will come to me and say we are planning a event, whether it's for the press, if it's for influencers, what have you, or if it's a premiere. So typically before the pandemic, most of the events I did were movie premieres, but this one in particular was for the press. And for the US versus Billie Holiday, that was actually a gifting project. So there were two very different projects, but the
Mm.
process was fairly the same to your point because I am project managing that particular project. So one was a drive-in and one was a gifting box. And I was doing a lot of gifting boxes as well when I pivoted because they, instead of being able to do live events, we were sending gifting boxes to various influencers or press or what have you. And it was a party in a box, if you will, or it was the movie wrapped up in a box. So I basically had to design a box based on the event. So instead of designing
Mm.
a room, I was designing the box. And that's what I had to do, which is I had to make sure I had the right size box. What was I going to fit in it? And what items would represent the film. So with my event design and event project management, I basically have to design and execute. So in terms of the whole process, the client will come, we will start the process in terms of what type of event it is. And then I have to figure out what budget it is, the number of people. And then we will just take the Godzilla versus Kong, for example. We have to figure out the space.
Mm.
And from the space, we have to do a layout. So with the layout, we figure out, what are we going to do when the guests first come in? Where's check-in? How are the cars going to get laid out? Where are we going to have lighting? So you're basically looking at each nook and cranny of the space and deciding what the flow of the event is and deciding what the guest experience is going to be. So once you figure all of that out, you do your site visits with your vendors. You then, and I have a vision in my head of what I would like to see or what I would like the guests to see. I then put it into a design deck and I put a budget together. I reach out to my lighting vendors, to my scenic vendors, and, catering, venue. And I am basically working with all the different parts and putting it into a pretty little package so that the client, all they have to do is take a look and say yes or no. So they're hiring me basically to help them execute a vision within a budget, within a certain time frame. And they have other things they have to worry about. So they hire me so that I am literally just handing them options and what the look looks like. And they get to say yes or no. And I make it easy and they say, yes, this is great. And then I execute. So event planning is very much a left brain, right brain type of job, if you will. There's event designers, there's event producers, event planners, if you will. There's a lot of different terminologies, but what I do is I do both. I actually design and execute. So there are event planners who hire event designers to design and come in and make it happen, but the event planner makes sure that everything is organized and the timeline executes properly, right? And is there to make sure all the vendors are doing what they're doing. In my case, I love what I do because I get to do both. I get to create and execute. I love being able to use my left brain to be creative and my right brain to be organized and execute.
Mm.
So, and on top of all that, one of my things that I love to do as well is ensure that the client is getting the best event within the budget that's given to me. A lot of people always think like, oh, studios, they have so much money, but that's not really fair. And nor is it okay to say, oh, well, we can charge this much because they're a studio. That's not true. I treat every budget very carefully. This is somebody else's money that I am responsible for. So I need to make sure that I am spending it wisely in a smart way. And I am stretching their dollars as much as possible to give them the best event possible. So if that means I have to negotiate and I have to make sure that, I can make sure that I am getting them the best pricing possible, that's also one of my jobs. So I get to negotiate as well to make sure that, everything is in budget.
I'm just trying to envision all of the people that you have to coordinate. Oh my God, God bless you, Jennifer, because, I'm just envisioning, because just based on, again, that beautiful slide deck that you shared with me, it's very obvious that you work with some professional photographers, I would imagine. You mentioned some lighting folks. Who are some of the other types of people that you typically work with, no matter what type of event it is?
So in a real live event, I would typically also work with a florist, a caterer. So with the florist, we're figuring out what florals work best. So as the event planner and / producer, you have to know enough about each of your vendors, I guess, if you will, and elements to be able to design that particular aspect. For example, for florals, I have to know enough about flowers to say, or to ask, like, what flowers are in season, right? And I never like to promise anything that we can't get. So we have to find out what flowers are in season, and then we go from there. And then I have a particular color palette that I want. I give them descriptions, and you have to be very descriptive as to what you're looking for. Do you want something structural? Do you want something loose? So you have to be able to be very descriptive in what you want so that the vendor can succeed and be able to give you what it is that you're looking for. So I have to basically describe what's in my brain and put it on paper, or be able to verbalize what it is that I'm looking for. And lighting, for example, I know that I want to make everything red on one side and blue on the other side, right? And but I also need to know enough so that if I'm ever working with a lighting vendor that's out of state that I usually don't get to work with, if they say, oh, you only need 2 licos, I know that a room of a particular size needs 4 licos. So you have to know enough to be able to catch things, if you will, so that you are able to, again, execute the best looking event possible for your client. So there's florists, lighting vendors, AV vendors. I work with valet companies. There's caterers, which we do food tastings with. We always make sure we do our food tastings, which is one of my favorite part of the jobs. I get to eat. And honestly, sometimes I say to myself, is this really my job? People will say, what did you do today? I will say, oh, I went to go watch a movie for research to see how I should design this event. And then I went for a food tasting and I got to taste 20 different dishes to decide what I wanted to eat. And that was my day. So, and I got to go and walk through different venues throughout the city and see which one we want to, go with. So sometimes I pinch myself and say, is this really my job? Because I'm just having fun. So, and it's a very people person type job. I mean, the vendors that I have, oh my gosh, they are amazing. And they go the extra mile to continually help make me shine, and in turn makes the client shine. And, all of them give their all 150% really to ensure that, the best product is given to every and any event that we produce.
So with so many moving parts to produce an event and to manage it as well, is there certain software, Jennifer, that you're using, or is it just like an Excel spreadsheet even? Because I would imagine that you have in coordinating all of these different things, for example, the floral arrangements and the caterer, because those aren't things that can just be done months in advance. It needs to be done as close to the event as possible because
Mhm.
flowers will die. Food, we know what can happen with food. So,
Mhm.
how do is there some type of software that you're using to help from a project management standpoint?
I know this is going to sound really crazy, but I do not use any software except Excel. I do have my own project timeline that I use for myself to
Mm.
ensure that we are hitting certain milestones. And we know that at a certain point, we have to make sure. And actually, what I do with my clients is I send them a deliverables timeline so that we are all on the same page about what it is that is coming up. And I make sure I do that because I hate when I have to send the client something and say, I need your approval in an hour. That is not fair to the client.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So I send a deliverables timeline. I work out exactly how many versions of the design deck they will be getting, how many versions of the budget they will be getting. And then I work in their review time because sometimes they have to take it to the higher ups. So I take all of that into account. So I have so let's just say we have 6 weeks to plan or 4 weeks to plan, then I back it up. So I know that 2 weeks before the event, I have to confirm everything. And if I am contacted 4 weeks before, that means I have 2 weeks to get different revisions, different edits together so that we can get to the 2 week mark to get confirmation. So then I work backwards. So
Mhm.
we then say, this is when we're going to do our food tasting. This is where you're going to get version 1 of the deck, version 2 of the deck, version 3 of the deck. So that they put in their calendar when they have to give me feedback. And sometimes they'll say, oh no, I have an event that day. Can we please move our review day to another day? Now they see our timeline so that they're not chasing me. I'm not chasing them. This deliverables timeline that I put together for them is really quite helpful because then we're all on the same page about who's expecting what when.
Yes. And I'm also curious, do you hand sketch your design concept? Or because I did notice some renderings in the capabilities deck that you shared with me. Is that something that you do or you have someone on your team that does that based
I
on
have
your vision?
I have a freelance person who does renderings for me.
Okay.
Most of our decks are inspiration photos that I'll put together. And then we'll do a layout, which I have a graphics person who helps me with my layouts. But we also have somebody who actually does 3D renderings. There are certain projects that require 3D renderings and so that they can present it to the higher executives.
Mhm.
And then, but my 3D renderer, he is amazing. I mean, I love putting the photos side by side, his rendering, and then against the actual
Oh, it's
photo,
it's amazing.
isn't it? And we're basically saying this is what your party's going to look like. And, it's really important for them to be able to see what it is going to look like. And I never like to overpromise. I always like to over deliver. So I make sure that if I put something in a rendering, it's happening. And if I can't make it happen, I will not put it in there. And, it is really important to always make sure you under promise, if you will, and make sure that if you're going to be offering something, you have to double check, triple check, is that actually going to work? Because there are times that I come up with ideas, but before I present them, I will go to my scenic partners. I will go to my lighting people and say, is this something that can actually happen? Or is this just something in my head? And you don't ever want to go to a client and present something and say, oh, oops, actually, just kidding. That can't happen.
Mm.
You want to be able to make sure you've done your research, you've done all you can before you present anything to the client and then, they'll just make sure that you are delivering anything you promise.
Yeah, one thing I don't remember which event it was, but it appeared to have an ancient Egyptian theme to it. And it was like surrounded by water, I believe.
Oh, so that one was Ocean's 8, actually. And that was at the Met in New York. So it was the tomb. It looked like, so it was,
Yes.
we recreated the gala scene from Ocean's 8. And
Wow.
yes, so we took that particular scene in the movie and recreated it. But instead of having tables and chairs, we brought in lounge furniture. So we typically like to make it very casual and not too formal so that people can mingle. And because what it is with a movie premiere, they just watch the movie. The guests just watch the movie and now they're stepping into the after party. And what I always like to do is make sure that the after party is a continuation of their evening. Now, I can't recreate the exact movie, right? But I can recreate the essence of the movie. So that's my job, which is to make sure that I can carry through the theme and the essence of the movie and make it feel like they are still experiencing the movie once they've left that theater and now they're stepping into the after party. So my job for those movie premieres is to make sure that I can continue the evening where it really feels like one complete evening that they started and ended with.
Well, it's amazing because I remember seeing I can't remember which image I saw first, if it was a photo from the actual event.
Oh, right.
Compared to the rendering. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, you can barely tell the difference. Can we please share that in our show notes? Because it's okay with you. I mean, just
yes,
nothing else to be able to show that side by side comparison. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely. You can share that, side by side of the rendering and the real photo. I was so happy with the results of that event. And, working at the Met, it's a challenge because there are artifacts in there, right? So
yes.
there was somebody standing there making sure we were, we weren't touching anything that we weren't supposed to. And but we got to load in overnight. And I'm just going to tell you, standing in the middle of that room at the Met in the middle of the night, just by ourselves. Wow. It was incredible. So it's those moments that are so special. But it's the Met and we had to make sure we followed the rules and we were still able to create a beautiful, beautiful event. And it's working with partners who understand the venue and the venue's working with us. And everybody's goal is to have a fabulous evening for the clients. So it's really important to communicate and work together. And we just need to make sure that they understand what our end goal is and to be clear about our end goal and that we're respectful. Actually, event planning and event production is very, very stressful. And it can it could get to a level where, if you don't control that stress, if you will, things can come out where it's just like, oh my gosh, what just happened? But, I always remember, I'm like, I am not saving lives here. I am throwing a party so people can have a good time. And that's what I always just remind people. This is not brain surgery. We are not doing brain surgery. And we are having a good time, everybody. And that is how I like to operate, which is, I have fun when I do this with all my vendors and they, we all have a good time while it's stressful, which I know that sounds really weird, but I mean, that is so important.
Yeah, I would imagine the satisfaction of knowing that we did it, know, that it was a success. I would imagine, it makes all of the stress in some way or another worth it. Right.
Absolutely. Seeing it on paper, seeing art starting from my brain to a piece of paper, then seeing an empty room and then transforming it and walking in for the first time and just seeing it all together. That is one of my favorite moments, which is being able to walk into that room completely done with the client and seeing their eyes light up. That is just, it's really special. And it's really such a magical process, actually, which is to be able to take something that's in your brain, then putting it on paper and make it come to life. It is quite special. So, like I said, I feel very fortunate to be doing what I love for a living.
That's awesome. And I wish we had more time to talk about boxes that you design, having a movie in a box, as you described it. But unfortunately, we have to start wrapping up, Jennifer. Can you believe it's almost been an hour?
Wow, that went by so fast.
Because I was especially curious about the box because I did attend an event it was a digital event last November. by a friend who's in New York, and she had a +1 invitation, and she extended that to me. And it was, I have to tell you, I know we've all been talking about Zoom fatigue and just, being on the computer all the time because
I
we
know.
have to do things from, things aren't still, completely open at this point as of this interview. What I love about that concept is that it's an analog feature, and it breaks up, I guess, that monotony of sitting in front of your computer for hours on end and receiving that box, and it's still very interactive. So I think it's an amazing concept. It drew me into the event it was something for a nonprofit organization. It was a
Nice.
fundraising event. And so when I heard you describe the movie in a box, that's what I thought about. How can people get in touch with you? Because clearly you know what you're doing. And for people like myself, where I know the stress would just be way too much
Yeah.
for me to take on, I was like, call Jennifer. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
People can email me at jennifer@jwangconsulting.com. And that's JENNIFER @JWANG consulting.com.
And you get most of your business through referrals, right?
That is correct.
Yes.
It's word of mouth, actually. So that I also
is
feel
amazing.
fortunate about that. Yes. So my clients continually refer me to other colleagues, or they go to a new company and bring me along. So I definitely feel very fortunate about that as well.
And I think it's just a true testament to your ability to foster these relationships, to nurture them, to cultivate them through those principles that, as you mentioned, were instilled in you by your parents, which is respect, right? And I can just see how your events can bring people together, and how it ties into the conversation that we also had around diversity. So I'd like to just kind of quickly recap some things. I know we're running out of time here, but I know I'm going to butcher this, so please forgive me, but 𝗟𝗲𝘁'𝘀?
Oh my
𝗟𝗲𝘁'𝘀?
gosh, you said it perfectly. Alicia,
Well, thank you. Thank you,
look at
Jennifer.
you.
I was Chinese in a past life.
I mean, apparently, when you went to the exhibit,
I learned a few things, yes.
That's right.
But I love that because I grew up similarly, that you are taught to respect your elders and your parents. You don't question. And you're right, we do have to learn how to find that happy medium. And I'm so with you on not living a life of extremes, but figuring out how we can survive this world, right? And part of that is being open to understanding others. You don't have to be confrontational. Maybe have a conversation with someone or some type of an interaction with someone else who may have an opposing view, or that person may say something that is rooted in ignorance. And you can find a way to educate that person. And maybe even, I love doing this also, if the opportunity presents itself, I also like to share sources of information. Well, don't just take my word for it. Go and read this book, or take a look at this particular article so that you can read it and do the research for yourself. I loved everything that you said, honestly, about, the fact that we're in a very interesting time right now, and because things are it's not hidden anymore. It's front,
out.
it's
out.
front and center. But to your point, imagine what could happen if every single one of us just took the time to have a conversation, even though it will be uncomfortable, but have the conversation. It starts there. I love the fact that you said that. And I can see how, speaking of respect, how that also carries over into the event planning work that you do. I also like the fact that you said the day that you stop learning from your career is the day that you need to find something else to do. And speaking of digital transformation, I know that we've all been challenged, and I actually applaud the fact that you have still figured out a way to have those quote unquote analog features to the work that you're doing, even though I would imagine many of your clients had to pivot to having online or digital events last year. So Jennifer, this was fantastic. We didn't even talk about that specialty software that you wish existed. Hey, that's okay. If you want more details about Jennifer and her event planning firm, Wang Consulting, be sure to email her. She was kind enough to share her email address. Again, that's Jennifer@jwangconsulting.com. Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. What a lovely afternoon this was talking to you.
Oh, thank you. And you, that's right, you, the listener, don't forget to check out businessinfrastructure.tv because that's where you'll be able to access links to all of these amazing resources that Jennifer shared with us throughout the interview. The best way to access it, again, is at businessinfrastructure.tv. And we're also going to have that side-by-side rendering versus real-life photograph from an event, from the Ocean's 8 event that Jennifer described. You can also search for Jennifer's episode by clicking on the Listen tab and selecting Season 12. Just look for her name and you'll be able to access the information that way as well. You'll also find more information about our sponsors. Supporting them helps us keep this show free for you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being a loyal subscriber. Remember, stay focused, be encouraged. This entrepreneurial journey is a marathon and not a sprint. Until the next time.
Thank you for listening to Business Infrastructure, the podcast about curing back office blues with 𝗟𝗟 𝗠𝗂𝗃𝗃. If you like what you've heard, do us a favor and subscribe, leave a rating and review, and more importantly, share with your colleagues and team members who could benefit from the information. Join us next week for another episode of Business Infrastructure with 𝗟𝗟 𝗠𝗂𝗃𝗃.